In history, people they've died from three big things. Three things have really kind of dominated human history in the past 3,400 years. Humans have been at peace for about 286 of them, is what they estimate, maybe. So it's about 8% of recorded human history. Maybe over 108 million people have been killed in wars in just the past century. And probably pushing 1 billion people who have died from war in the past human history. So 12,000 years, whatever you want to calculate, about 1 billion people is what they estimate. So in the past, about 15% of people at any point in time, through their lifetime or when they're on the planet, would have had the chance of dying from war. Today, those numbers are about 5%. In 2012, 56 million people died in the world. 620,000 from violence, about 120 from war, 500,000 from crime, 800,000 from suicide. Interestingly, diabetes killed 1.5 million people around the world. So war, mankind's doing a little better. Famine killed people. Still continues to kill people. In China in the 1950s, early 60s, 30 million people died from famine. And there have been 35 big famines they've documented in the past 100 plus years, where about 70 million people have died from famine or famine-related causes. That's a lot. And throughout history, war didn't kill you, famine would kill you. That was just what people had to deal with every day. And there's been a lot of that in the past century. But in the past 50 years, things are doing a lot better. We've had 250,000 people died in Somalia between 2010 and 2012 from the famine there. It was a big famine, but it wasn't in comparison to some of them in the past. Disease has killed 56 million people in 2015. Half of those were due to kind of 10 big causes. Ischemic heart disease and stroke. That was half of the world's deaths, or 15 million of the world's deaths of those 56 in 2015 were from disease. Chronic pulmonary obstructive pulmonary disease or emphysema, something like that, smoking and things like that, killed 3.2 million people. Lung cancer killed another 1.7. Diabetes in 2015 killed 1.6 million people around the world. Dementia was it was one of the leading causes as well. I actually didn't have the number for that one. Diarrheal diseases, so infectious diseases, killed 1.4 million people in 2015. Tuberculosis is still a dominant force in the world, and it killed another 1.4 million people. HIV and AIDS is actually down now. It's out of the top 10. It's only 1.1 million in 2015. And the other big killer for humans in 2015 was road injuries. Just motor vehicle accidents, road injuries, those kinds of things, of which, interesting, 76% of those are men or boys. So that's what kills people today. That's better than in human history. We used to die from war, famine, and disease, and those really are what wiped out people today. But if you look at some of those lists now, ischemic heart disease, stroke, lower respiratory infections, diarrheal infections, a lot of these things are preventable diseases that we've made a lot of progress on. You don't die automatically if you get an infection nowadays, as you did in the past. In life, as we know, lifespans are a lot longer. We don't live just 40, 45 years, as happened 100, 150 years ago. Now our ages are going much higher, beyond what we've seen in history. And over the next 5 to 20 years, we're going to see the world continue to change even faster. There is new technologies coming out in the health sciences and virtual technologies and everything that are going to change the world even faster. So the world has radically changed in the past 100 years from what it's been in history before that. Before, you died from war, famine, disease. It's going to change here. This world is changing. It's already changed in the past 50 years, where we're conquering war, we're conquering famine, conquering disease, according to what the world views these statistics are, right? So we're thinking about from that kind of viewpoint. So how do we get ready for what's coming, right? We've all read Revelation, and we're going to spend a little more time in that today. How are we going to get ready and educate ourselves to conquer things that the world has conquered, right? Mankind has seen us conquer the things that killed mankind. How do we approach that in the past? The world today, especially 2017, think about how different it was in 2007, right? The world's a different place when I came here in 2007 to Seattle with my family. Some of us were a lot younger in 2007, 10 years ago. We're seeing a reliance pretty much on everything in our lives, right? We're seeing a reliance upon shopping. We got Amazon to take care of our every need. We don't need to care for ourselves anymore. Man's becoming more impatient. We're involving home automation. I mean, if I have to open the key to the lock of my door nowadays, I'm like, I shouldn't have to do that, right? That's where we're headed. I mean, it's kind of silly, but it's something that everything we want, we can buy or sell, right? If I said, let's pick an object, I bet within 30 seconds, you could all have it up on your phones. And it could be on your way to your house within 5 minutes. Man's becoming proud. Man's becoming ignorant of their history. We're losing touch with our history and our past. Man's becoming filthy. We're calling evil good. We excuse bad behaviors because, well, that happened 40 years ago, and that was just the culture in that part of that particular state. Fortunately, we don't elect some of those people, but we've seen lots of this stuff going around nowadays. We're seeing just a vileness to humanity. Long as the end results are achieved, that's all that really matters, right? Long as we don't have to, as long as we get what we need in the end, as long as the election goes the way it's supposed to go, or whatever that is, we can excuse and we can elect whoever, we can compromise our values and our principles for as long as that end goal is achieved. Man seeks to love his own life with immediate satisfaction, with an immediate gain. Our economic systems are that way today, right? If we don't make money in Bitcoin over the past week, you're disappointed, right? I mean, has anybody invested in Bitcoin in here? Hopefully you did 5 years or 2 years ago, right? Or even a month ago, you could have made a lot of money in Bitcoin. It's a virtual thing. It doesn't really exist, but it does exist because people say it has value. And that's how we determine our society today, right? If we just say something has value, something has merit, no pun intended, if we say that's just what it is, suddenly that's all that matters. We're defining our own ends. Some see our health as worsening. We talk about disease and cancer is increasing a lot. Disease is actually not increasing a lot. We actually are beating these diseases that have wiped out populations. Yeah? The swine flu epidemics we hear about, the Ebola thing that we heard about a few years ago, that killed 10,000 people. That's not that bad of an epidemic when you consider the Spanish flus from the 1918s that killed 1/3 of the population in some countries. I mean, if we had lost 50 million people in the country, that might have been an epidemic according to what those old standards were. And the cancer, that's increasing, but that's actually an age-related thing. As we've gotten older and our time on this planet's longer, that's where cancer is coming from. The statistics show that. Over 60, 75% of cancers are over 60. It's an age-related thing. Our bodies are physical. They break down. But in the next 5, 10, 20 years, we're going to have to beat that. Cancer's in shot. There's technology that's coming out today, and there's some really fascinating technologies coming where you can go in and edit the DNA at a very specific point, where you can use hairpin RNA, and you can use other methods to silence genes so you don't even express those genes if they're causing cancer or if they're causing some sort of genetic disease. I have a kid who was in the hospital, was born a couple weeks ago. 3 years, 4 years from now, I'll be able to actually put a virus into him with the proper gene, and he's going to live a happy life. That technology is coming. We're going to defeat these things. Man has no vision today. We don't have the ability to see beyond our immediate satisfactions that we've talked about. Let's start putting this a little bit into context, and Matthew 24 and verse 10. And many shall be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. We've seen man get offended easily. Anybody know anybody like that today or hear that on the news 5 minutes ago? Well, maybe not 5. Say last night. Hopefully you didn't turn on your news this morning. You were able to avoid whatever somebody's offended about this morning. I don't know. Is there something new coming out, right? That's how immediate our society is, right? Did I miss the news this morning? Should I be offended about something that I wasn't offended about last night? There's an app for that, I think. But we're getting offended over little things. Is it big things? Whatever it is. We as a people, as a city, as a nation, on the planet, we're no longer happy just sitting back. We got to take control of that now. We don't have that vision for what's coming. And we're defining our own truths. We're defining what we to see is true and not true. Now, I'm not going to get into virtual reality. Mr. Holliday's done that in the past, and he's an expert on this. But go and read Revelation 9 and verse 20. This is the sixth trump, and the four angels have come down from the four corners of the earth. But the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of their works. They should not worship demons and idols of silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. Right? That's a virtual world. Those things don't exist in reality. And we thought of that as just a simple idol. But our world's different from what it was 50 years ago. Our world's different from what it was 1,000 years ago. Maybe those idols that can't see or hear or walk are actually something a little more we can understand a little bit better today. And man's just unwilling to follow God. I think at pretty much every level, right? Information is abounding. I teased a minute ago about pulling out your phone and looking up. Somebody could raise their hand and pick a fact, and we could verify that or find a blog probably on it within a few seconds, right? There's not one thing that is not withheld from our minds. There's not one thing that if we seek, we can't find. You're curious, well, what about this? I mean, I do it. Hey, Siri. Anybody's phone go off? No. But that's how quick this is, right? If you don't get that instant information feedback immediately, why not? My Wi-Fi is too slow. If we seek good, we can find good. So when I think about this world and I think about these things, I go back and let's read Genesis 3 and verse 5. For God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. Sorry, my thing just moved around here. Okay, speaking of technology, right? There we go. For God knows that in the day that you will eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. In verse 7, then the eyes of both of them were opened, and that they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves covering. Verse 22, and the Lord God said, behold, man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. Lest he put out his hand, and now let he put out his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. We know good and evil. We define it ourselves. We don't need God to define it for us. That's this world. And the tree of life and living forever, well, you're going to be able to do it maybe in the next 100 years. We're going to have the genetics, the medical technology to defeat the telomeres. We hear about you may have heard about those things. There are other things in the aging process. The technology to do that if it's not here today, it will be in the next few years. We're going to defeat death. We're going to defeat disease. And if you can't do that maybe in a biological sense, you're going to be able to do that from a digital sense. What happens when we start integrating technology and biology in our minds? So what is the point of this? Why do we look through this? We have to educate ourselves about this world here today. We have to educate ourselves and our minds. We know how this world's going to end. We know what's coming. We've read Revelation, and I want to step through Revelation here for the next few minutes and kind of go through that a little bit and kind of look at it in some of this context a little bit that I've set up here for a few minutes. And how do we overcome this? How do we take these things that we can laugh and chuckle about, but at the same time, when we see the stuff in the news, we get a little anxious, don't we? We don't understand this a little bit. How do we overcome these things? Revelation 11, verse 1. And then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles. And they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands standing before God of the earth, and if any wants to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anybody wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. These have the power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy, and they have the power to over waters to turn them to blood, to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. These two men will overcome, right? We see them in Revelation. They're two very specific figures that are clearly part of God's plan. These are the two witnesses. They will overcome the challenges of this earth. They're going to get a lot of help from above, right? God's going to be working in them, so they're not doing this by themselves. But God's protection and guidance gets them through. And where do these two men come from? They come from the temple of God, right? They come from the temple of God and those who worship there, because that's where the angel measured that, and then they were identified. Well, we know who the temple of God is, do we not? Revelation 3 and verse 12, and he who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God, and in the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him a new name. Ephesians 2 and verse 20, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows to a holy temple of the Lord, in whom you are also being built together in a dwelling place of the Spirit. These two men come from the temple of God. They come from us. Maybe it's Pat and John. Maybe it's Carla. We don't know who that is. And somebody out there, presumably alive today. Assuming this all happens in the next 20 years, they're probably walking the planet today. The word rise and measure the temple of God, rise is to rouse, to awaken, to stand up again, to take up. So this isn't just like standing up out of your chair, right? There's a motivation to this, right? You're rising to measure the temple of God. So, these two men have fascinating qualities. So let's go and look a little bit more now through Revelation and see what else we can pull out about the temple of God. Well, if you go to the next chapter, and I'm going to kind of move through here a little bit quickly, but we're going to step through Revelation a bit. Revelation verse 12, this is the woman, the child, and the dragon, right? The next section then comes Satan is thrown out of heaven. Revelation 12 and verse 10, and then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of brethren who has accused them before for our God day and night has been cast down. And verse 11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they did not love their own lives to death. So there's a quality there that you're seeing. They have the word of their testimony. Revelation 12 and verse 17, the dragon was enraged with the woman to make war with her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So there, the testimony of Jesus Christ, that is their testimony. That's their witness. That's what that word means. It's their record, it's their report. So these people are identified clearly through an individual. And they do what? What does that mean? They keep the commandments of God. They've defined truth. They've defined what that truth is, and they refer to that. Is that? Okay, I just stepped back. I think that's what happened. They keep the commandments of God. That word, it means to guard, to hold fast, to keep, to preserve or reserve, to watch. So they're not just like, yeah, I'm keeping the commandments of God. No, they're guarding and holding it fast. They're hanging on to it. And they're living by that. Not loving, and the third point is not loving their own lives to the point of death. They're placing the needs of somebody else before their own lives. That's all that means. You're putting the needs of others, what needs to be done, whether that's when you get up in the morning, or maybe that's going to be some sort of ultimate sense of that word in the next 10, 20, 50 years when you're put into that situation. They put the needs of others before themselves. This can be simple acts of kindness, or this can be you got to literally lay down your life. And we think that's easy for our kids. for our wife or a spouse or a husband, maybe that's not so easy for the person sitting in the row in front of you or behind you. Or maybe the person walking on the trail outside today. Revelation 13 and verse 1. I'm going to read this whole kind of section here a bit. And then I stood at the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on horns, 10 crowns. And on his heads, a blasphemous name. And think about that in the world we see today. Not necessarily think of the fantastic visuals we've seen in the past, but think about it in the world in the next few years. And I saw a beast which was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and the mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, with great authority. And I saw one of his heads as had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast, and worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who can stand up to the world that's coming? Who's going to be able to resist that world? Who's going to be able to resist the power that world will have to defeat death in the world's terms, right? Who's going to be able to resist that world in the way that the technology that beast power will have? That could be interesting. We're kind of thinking about these things a little bit in a different context. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and great blasphemies. That happens today. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, the tabernacle, and all those who dwell in heaven. It was granted with him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and the authority was given over him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. And all who dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into a captivity will go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. There's a bit of a warning here. If you have an ear, hear. Or if you have an ear, let him hear, right? Avoiding captivity, avoiding the sword. Some interesting concepts that I kind of was when I was preparing this. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? But that's a very specific statement that we have. But what does that mean? But the patience of the saints. So through these things, through those 42 months, through the blasphemies, through the authority that's given to the beast, through all the things that are happening, the patience of the saints. That's what you have to get through that. You have to be long-suffering. Sounds like a fruit of the Spirit. And they have patience and the faith of the saints, right? Faith is what? Faith is the hope of the substance of things not seen, right? The things you can't see today. I think when that world comes, it's going to be hard to see anything beyond what you're being faced with. If you can't see it, that's your faith. You're seeing the mystery of God, right? You know that will be coming. Revelation 13 continues with the beasts of the earth. And then in Revelation 14, we hit the Lamb and the 144,000. And chapter 14, verse 4, and these are the ones who are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. For those are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, where those were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they without fault before the throne of God. Revelation 14, verse 12, and there is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and of the faith of Jesus. Again, we're seeing a lot of qualities kind of pop out here, right, in these verses. You got patience again, keeping the commandments of God. You have to stick back to those fundamental basics, back to the truth of God. They're not defiled with women. They follow the Lamb. They're redeemed from among men. They're firstfruits. Again, very poignant. We understand these terms. In them was found no deceit, for they were without fault before the throne of God. We heard a sermon on that a few weeks ago. Where is there deceit in your life today? Not defiled without women. And think of the blasphemies and the things, and all this is coming virtually. There's shops now in Germany where robots perform brothel functions. That's the world that's coming. It's vile. It's disgusting. We have to stay pure before God. We have to follow the Lamb. The bold judgments come up in Revelation 16. In Revelation 16 and verse 15, there's a thief who watches, who keeps his Blessed is he who watches, I should say, and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and see his shame. So he's watching, he's keeping his garments prepared. What are those garments? Those are the garments in Revelation 19, verse 8. Those who are arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. So having a life of righteousness. Revelation 5 and 19, verse 5 and 19, verse 7, two other qualities are reinforced here. Praising our God, and Revelation 19, verse 7, rejoicing and giving him glory. So we see another quality of the saints coming here. They're preparing their garments, they're praising God, and they're giving him glory. Those things are not going to be so easy. Being and keeping yourself clean and pure is going to be harder. Walking in righteousness is not an easy thing. Walking in righteousness is living a life of agape, is it not? It's putting the needs of others before. These things tie together. So how are we going to endure these end times? How are we, over the next 20 years, we'll say? Maybe it's 40 years, maybe it's 50 years. We have no idea. Are we keeping the testimony of God and as a witness to God? Do people see that? Are we keeping his commandments? Are we not loving our own lives? Do we have patience, faith? Are we watching? Are we being vigilant about watching? Are we putting on the garments of righteousness, clean and bright, and then praising God and giving him the glory? We need to be doing more. We need to be showing the world how to do this, how to endure the pain of this world, how to live in the world and be something different. We have to be great. We can't just be good. A choice is coming. We can choose to live by the dictates of those who influence this world, the whims of this world. You don't need even the stuff that's been going on with the Me Too texts, the men who have been inappropriate with women throughout their lives, and that's going on throughout society. You get 40, 50, however the count is, all these public figures are being brought down from high. There's no trial there, right? I'm not saying these people haven't done anything wrong. There's no trial. If somebody just creates something on the internet or says something, or you get 5 people who can reinforce that story, that's all it takes to destroy those people's lives. Now, what they did was bad, but should we not need a little evidence first? Should there not be a process of law in that process? Or is it just the whims of the people? There's something there that's a little dangerous, is there not? Maybe the right things are happening today, and those people are guilty. But there's a process. It shouldn't be just a whim. It shouldn't just be whatever truth the population decides is on Twitter that day, or that weekend, or whatever comes out. There should be substance to these things. Or we can choose to live by those who are the servants, who are kneeling before each other in service, who are humble, who are transparent, who don't have to hide whatever they did 40 years ago or 5 years ago. Those who are not just living filio, not just brotherly love, we get along, let's go have a beer together. No, it's not an emotional, crude thing, but a deep expression of agape in their lives. They have a deep life that's humble, submitted to seeking the best for the other person. It's not about just them being happy that day. Maybe it is. Maybe you just need to give somebody a warm coat on the street. Maybe you need to sacrifice yourself in some other way before you go to bed that night. You have to do something. Maybe it's whatever it is. Maybe it's what you're going to have to do in the future. There are ways that we have to be ready to sacrifice. Revelation 11, verse 1 says angel will stand up and rise and measure the temple of God. We're being accounted for here. We have to be preparing ourselves to be one of those witnesses. Now, we don't know who that is. We're not going to speculate on that. But we have to be ready. Those principles apply for us. Because those 2 witnesses are going to be in the kingdom, I'm pretty sure, the way it kind of the story reads out, right? You're going to be there too. You got to learn those same qualities today. You have to take action in your life today. You have to be a person of honor, above reproach. You have to be able to trust each other. We have to be transparent enough to know that we're not hiding anything that's going to come out on Twitter tomorrow or somebody might make up. I mean, the technology is coming. They're going to be able to virtually create synthetic, all that virtual, go to see Star Wars this weekend. That's a great virtual world. But we know it's not a fiction, but if they created that of something happened to you yesterday, they could take a picture of, let's pick one of us, say Michael. He was doing something yesterday in downtown Seattle. He never was there, he didn't have anything happen. But what if the technology is there to put him there and, there was somebody he was tweeting and it looked like some other whatever. You could create situations today with today's technology to make that real. And if they can't do it tomorrow, they're going to be able to do it in the next few years, right? The digital technology is there. What do you trust? Do you trust the Word of God? Do you trust those principles? Do you have the faith in what that's coming? Revelation 18, verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins and lest you receive of her plagues." We have to be coming out of it now. We have to be getting ready. We have to be living a life of righteousness. Isaiah 28 and verse 7, a life of righteousness is that plummet line, is that measuring line. We have to be coming back to that all the time. We don't have a choice in that matter. Well, there's a second resurrection for you, I guess, if that's what, your time is today, right? That's not a cop-out excuse either. Your time is today. You have to be making account for what you're doing in your lives here today, because this is your chance. Because why is this happening? We need to be great. We need to be reading our Bible. We need to be putting our minds and our hearts and our souls into the Bible, into the Word of God. We need to be following the examples of, read Daniel. He lived in that world, right? Strive to be forward, move forward, and be the best. Don't just be good. Be the best. Be the best at being a Christian here today. Be the best at living in this world. And in 2 Peter 3 and verse 10, and we'll finish up with this, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. We're not going to know it's coming, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with a fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. We're going to see that coming. We're not going to be deceived by that, right? Even the elect, if possible, may be deceived. Nonetheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found by him in peace, without spot and blameless.